grab your leash and watch where you step, because we're going to the dog park. Good evening and welcome to Give Me a Break. I'm Jonathan Carmody. If you live in a Flower Bluff area, which I live in, drive down Graham Road, drive down Waldron Road. You intersect at near the police station, the tennis courts, and the playground, and the pavilion. There is, and right by the apartments, there is a dog park. And they just opened up. Now what does the city have to say? Well, my good friend Tony Halamir just visited the park. He heard from city officials, and he has some great news. Here's Tony Halamir.
There, Fido, hey, Fido, here. Tom, Stefan, and Fido were the very first to step inside of the new dog park at Parker Park. What do you think about it?
Oh, it's fantastic. Very convenient for me. I only live 2 miles away.
Convenient because this is a first for Flower Bluff neighbors who before had to travel to the island or the south side for a dog park.
No. He won't do it. He's too excited.
I first told you about the dog park being built in Flower Bluff about 2 months ago. Today I followed up with city leaders for an opening date, and when I arrived, crews were taking down fencing to open up the park, ready for its first visitors.
Well, I'm kind of honored to be the first one, and Fido, he loves to do anything.
What about the park's upkeep? According to city documents, the dog park will require an addition of 2 full-time positions and annual maintenance, and operation costs are estimated at $250,000. I shared these numbers with Stefan.
Pretty expensive.
I asked the city for a breakdown of this estimate, but did not receive an answer. They said the park staff was unavailable today because they were occupied at the cold weather refuge centers. Although we didn't receive an answer for clarification on the maintenance costs of the park, I'll be sure to follow up. In Flower Bluff, I'm your neighborhood news reporter, Tony Hadamio, Chris 6 News.
Thank you, Tony. Let's go. That's time to leave the dog park and get out of this and get out of the dog park, get out of the energy land, and let's get back to some real issues. Alright, my head was wrapped around the 2013 Price is Right episode of Models Rule. I'd rather watch that than go to that dog park. Over $200,000. Está loco. Over $400,000. Está loco. Está loco, nombre. Está loco, nombre, cabrón. Well, you know it is cold. And now Warming Center, and now, well, I don't know what else to say. I got no idea what else to say. No idea at all. I wouldn't end this episode early, but then I don't know. I don't know what to say. I got no idea what else to talk about. I mean, except TikTok's back. That's not newsworthy. But there's no sense to raise common sense. It's just that, there's no need to go to the south side or downtown to go find a good dog park. So if you live in the Flower Bluff area looking for a great dog park, that's a good place. That's a great place for you. No matter the cost, no matter the handling or the shipping of the park. My head was wrapped around that 2013 episode of Price is Right. I didn't have much to say. So the only thing I gotta say right now is they did a really great job at the park. Large parks, large dogs, small dogs. It's really great. that this community, it doesn't just have me, it has a dog park. Not that I'm loosening screws or tightening winches here. But yeah. It really is great to see a dog park in action. And clearly, you know, we my sister-in-law has a dog. I'm not going to get into much family details here because I don't have much to say, but except, y'all know what time it is. It's like a little Saturday. When we come back, this man admitted he'd been involved in this girl Logo's abduction while he says this man molested her. Neither was arrested, and both are walking the streets. A second look into the case of Jill Cuttrell when we return. Please stay with us. Take a look at this sweet little girl. Isn't she sweet? If you were around in the 1980s, you may have heard the case of a little girl by the name of Jill Cuttrell. She was missing. She was missing after leaving her house, doing her chores, and going to babysitters blocks away. But the case got deeper when all of a sudden the man you're about to meet, which you'll meet tonight, he says in a confession tape, which you'll see tonight, he says he was involved in the girl's abduction. While this man, which you'll meet tonight, which you also meet tonight, he says he was also involved in the little girl's abduction. Of course, the other man says that the other man molested her. As I first told you when I first showed you my reaction to this story, it was the largest manhunt in the state of Nebraska's history. Tonight, we're going to take a second look into the case of Jill Cuttrell. And at the end of the segment, we're going to let you know what's been happening after the 6 Man story aired. What really happened in Norfolk, Nebraska? Here's Molly Safer with our second look.
See if we can't do something else for you then.
Then this private investigator, who'd become obsessed with the case, got a confession. This man admitted he'd been involved in the girl's abduction and had held her while he said this man molested her. Neither was arrested. Both are walking the streets. Norfolk, Nebraska is best known as Johnny Carson's hometown. Beyond that, it's a sleepy place in the middle of cornfields and cow pastures. A nice place to grow up. A nice place for kids. Jill Cuttrell was one of the kids growing up in Norfolk. This home movie of her was made a year before she disappeared. Though her parents were divorced, she seemed a perfectly happy little girl.
It was the summer of '87. 9-year-old Jill Cuttrell was spending the summer holiday with her father and her stepmother in this basement apartment of this building called McNeely House. The routine was this. The Cuttrells would leave for work about 6 a.m., Jill would do the dishes, and then walk the 4.5 blocks to a babysitter's where she would spend the day. August 13th was typical. The Cuttrells left for work about 6 a.m., Jill did her chores, and then apparently left the house and was never seen again. A massive search was organized, the FBI was brought in, but nothing. Not a trace of her was found.
But 3 months later, at a remote area called Wood Duck, police got their first break.
A hunter in this wildlife preserve stumbled across the clothes she was wearing the day she vanished. Purple shirt, white sneakers, blue jeans, and her underwear. The police again launched a massive search. The FBI was brought in. They brought in special dogs trained to find bodies, but nothing was found. At this point, the police had interviewed 600 people and still did not have a lead.
4 months later, 7 months after Jill disappeared, the Norfolk police started questioning Kermit Crumroy Baumgartner, a 61-year-old man, twice divorced, with 9 children. He was living on the second floor of Jill's apartment house at the time Jill disappeared. The investigation of Kermit soon led police to David Phelps, a 24-year-old who briefly shared Kermit's apartment. They were lovers. Both men had a history of child molestation. David's sister, Gail Peterson, told police about her brother's problem, specifically about one incident in Arkansas.
David was sent down to live with me when I was down there, and I lived with a girl who had a 4-year-old daughter, and sometime during the night he crawled into bed with her, and the little girl told her mother the next day, and then they came and told me about it.
Did you confront him?
Yes, I did.
And what did he say?
He didn't deny it. The only thing he had to say was he did it because he wanted to feel good.
How old was he then?
16.
Gail was concerned that her brother might be involved in Jill's disappearance. The police investigation seemed to be going nowhere, so she voiced her concerns to Jill's mother, Joyce Cutchell.
What did you do with that information?
I called my investigator, my private investigator,
It was Roy Stevens.
Roy Stevens.
Roy Stevens, a private investigator who specializes in missing children, entered the case 5 days after Jill disappeared. He admits he became obsessed with it, worked without salary. When he questioned David Phelps, Phelps implicated Kermit, but offered nothing concrete. On January 4th, 1989, a year and a half after Jill disappeared, Stevens tried to bring the case to a head. He took Phelps out to Wood Duck, to a spot near where Jill's clothing was found. After an hour and a half of wandering around, Stevens says, Phelps began to break.
And he said, Roy, he goes, it's time to get this off my chest. I need to start telling you what happened.
Stevens says that David Phelps then confessed that he was involved in Jill's disappearance. Stevens took him to the Econo Lodge Motel in Norfolk, to room 115, where a local television crew was waiting. Phelps confessed again, this time on camera. He told Marcia Cady from Channel 3 Omaha that on the day Jill disappeared, he and Jill got into a car with Kermit, who drove them out to Wood Duck.
Jill got really nervous and everything. Kermit got her out of the car. He put his left hand over her mouth and shoved her backwards. And Kermit kept his hand on her mouth, started fondling her and stuff. I got real nervous and I says, hey, let's get the hell out of here, you know. And Kermit says, well, if you take the car and you go back town, I'll get back later. And I left.
You didn't molest Jill.
I became very aroused when she was standing against me. The temptation was there, but I was more scared. I just wanted to get out of there.
You never touched her sexually?
No.
Who took her clothes off?
Kermit's the one that got her pants off.
Roy Stevens, the private investigator, was present during the Channel 3 taping and felt moved to ask David,
Have I or anybody else threatened you by not making these comments?
No.
Police then picked up Phelps and brought him in for questioning.
He again repeated almost verbatim the exact same story that he gave to me. Only he went further in making the statement that Jill was not supposed to die, that it was an accident.
But when David Phelps' attorney showed up, he recanted the confession. Norfolk Police Chief Bill Meisner and County Attorney Richard Crepola felt that without Jill's body, they had no case.
He claimed that he had been under duress and that everything that he had said because of that duress.
Police released him that night and have not spoken to him since. But the next day, Phelps' sister Gail went to talk to him. She was furious and raised her hand as if to strike him.
I said, you little son of a bitch, after everything we've been through, and you say you're not going to talk to me. And he looked at me and said he was going to have me arrested for assault. And I said, fine, you go right ahead. That sounds real good coming out of a rapist and a murderer.
That's what you said.
And that's what I said.
What did he say?
He looked at me and he had very cold eyes, very dead eyes, and he said, I did not confess to rape and murder. I confessed to kidnapping and molestation.
Channel 3 broadcast a brief excerpt of the confession that did not name Phelps and disguised his face and his voice. A few days later, David Phelps left Norfolk, Nebraska. Kermit Baumgarten stayed a week or so longer, then he too left town. David, who got married and had a baby daughter, kept moving around. Close friends and family did not know their whereabouts. We managed to trace them to a cheap motel in Southern California.
Hi, David? David Phelps?
Who are you?
I'm Morley Safer, CBS, 60 Minutes.
So?
I would like to talk to you.
About what?
I think you know what we want to talk about. I'd like to clear the air on this thing, and the whole thing. You know.
I think what you need to do, if you want to talk to anybody, is you go talk to David Dahman in Norfolk first.
Who's that?
My attorney, David Dahman, out of Norfolk, Nebraska.
Hi, you Kim? Yeah. Hi, Kim. How are you? David? David?
We brought David's sister Gail along, hoping she could convince him to talk.
David, let me talk to you a minute.
After a few minutes, David agreed to talk to Gail, and a few minutes later came out again, obviously upset that we found him. In his confession, he'd said that he and Kermit had been drinking heavily the night before Jill disappeared. But here, he said he was sober. His own lawyer confirms the first version.
The circumstantial evidence here is this. This is a young man who is in the wrong place, using alcohol at the wrong time, who has a criminal record, who is himself of limited capacity.
David Domina is David Phelps' attorney. Domina is one of Nebraska's most prominent lawyers. He agreed to be interviewed only after we showed him Phelps' entire confession.
What he didn't say on the tape and what his behavior suggested was, I think, that there may have been fear and intimidation involved.
He has endangered my life because of Stevenson. He has threatened me more than once to kill me.
Threatened you?
David? Including the day we talked.
Why did you sit down and talk to him?
That's, like I said, I'm not going any further than that, but you've now endangered my safety and my family.
Roy Stevens continued to deny any threat had been made. But quite suddenly, he made a remarkable confession to us. For the first time, he admitted he'd become so frustrated with lack of progress that he pulled a gun that day out at Wood Duck and fired a shot in the air.
He immediately turned around and looked at me, and I still was holding the gun straight up in the air. I then brought it down and put it away. His very first statement after that was, "Can I have a cigarette?"
In making the admission that he'd threatened Phelps with a gun, Stevens also admitted his own criminal record, a burglary he'd committed 13 years before. As a convicted felon, he could not be licensed as a private investigator, so he lied on his application.
And going after him so hard now, ultimately, you paid a very heavy price, right?
It cost me my career. But it's a small price to pay. I was a private investigator up until yesterday. I turned my license in.
Why did you pull the gun? Didn't you know that act could make anything that you then said subsequently invalid as evidence?
I'm not so sure it makes it totally invalid. I'm not a cop. I'm just an ordinary citizen.
Because Stevens threatened Phelps, it may well be that Phelps did concoct a confession to get away from Stevens. Except for one quite chilling part of that confession, though police had never issued a description of Jill's underwear, Phelps was able to describe it.
If I remember right, like white underwear, and I had these little, circular designs on them, like little swirls and stuff on them.
Was that considered to, at the time, as a break in the case?
It was looked at.
It's a very bureaucratic answer.
Well,
What'd you think?
It's something we looked at. It's not something that we passed over. It's not something that we missed. That was part of our consideration in conducting our follow-up investigation.
That included a brief questioning of Kermit Baumgartner last January, but police have not talked to him since. We found him living in the Star Hotel, a boarding house in Northern California.
Kermit, Hi, how are you? I'm Morley Safer from CBS. I want to talk to you about Norfolk. And David Phelps. And what you may remember about Jill Cutchell.
Yeah.
What happened?
I don't know, because I was involved in it. No way with her.
Do you think David assaulted her?
I don't know.
Do you have a record for molesting children?
No, not that I know of.
Did you ever molest children?
No. Yes, I did too. I got picked up in Nebraska, and I had a kid that he was 16 years old.
You were picked up by police in Nebraska?
I went to jail for a year. We got to do this on the street.
You want to go up and do it too?
No, I don't want to go to my room. The landlord throw me out.
You ever been to Wood Duck?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Ever?
I think he had a friend one time, and with his other friend's car. We drove someplace out that way, but never with my car.
You molested your own kids, didn't you?
I didn't, but that's what they tried. That's what the ex-old lady tried to prove.
Your former wife?
Yeah.
Well, the kids say that you did.
I did not.
Did you ever talk about little girls? You and David?
One time, that's what I told that private investigator.
Yeah?
But, I told him what David Phelps told me that one day. He said, I like to get in her pants, is what he told me.
Talking about Jill?
That's what he told me.
I'm still trying to get to the bottom of why. Why Phelps would make up such a story about you.
I think he's trying to cover his own tracks, is what I think.
Chief Miser, what's the status of the Jill Cutchell case now?
Right now, we are in what we term to be a semi-active status, and we're waiting to see if there's any new leads that come in.
Phelps says he's been made into a scapegoat because of 2 felonies on his record and other incidents involving children.
You were talking about molestation, right?
Well,
there were incidents in your past.
Right.
You can take him out and put a bullet between his eyes. He's hurt a lot of children that he's confessed to. I just don't believe society has any use for people like that.
There's no affection left?
For my brother, yes, but for the person who did this, no. My brother's dead. The human being that was in there is dead. And now, when he looked at me with those eyes that were just blank behind there, then I think that's when he died.
He should not be on the street. He has hurt 3 other girls, 4 counting Jill. He has a baby girl at home now. He may not have to go on the street to look for a little child. He's got a 2-year-old baby girl at home. That scares the hell out of me.
Are you convinced in your own heart that he's not involved?
I'm convinced in my own heart that he is not guilty of any crime.
That wasn't the question.
That's the answer.
So the question you gotta ask is, what happened after the story aired? Did David Phelps get arrested? And what about Kurt? What was he a part of all this? When we return, we're going to let you know what happened after the case. And later on, another second look that you might remember, might not remember. It involves the story of a blind person. A dark victory. Please stay with us. It's been over 30 years since the incident that happened in northern Nebraska back in 1987 of the case of Jill Cutchell. David Phelps was on 60 Minutes telling his side of the story about what happened, with Kermit saying that David Phelps was making a confession just to get his ass handed to him. Now the question is, after the 60 Minutes story aired, what happened to the characters and what happened to David Phelps? Well, According to the CharlieProject.org, the organization which did the case, this was from years ago. This wasn't. I'm going to read to you a portion of what was included in that 60 Minutes report. January 1989, a private investigator hired by Joyce drove Phelps to the wildlife refuge where Jillian's clothes were found. Later that day, Phelps gave a statement to a television crew. The investigator had Wayne and said that he and another neighbor, Kermit Baumgartner, who had a record for sexual assault, took Jillian to the refuge. Phelps described the child's clothes and undergarments correctly and said he held her down while Baumgartner molested her. He stated he became nervous and left Baumgartner with Jillian alone in the refuge, drove back home, and he never saw the child again. Remember, David says he did not sexually molest her. Baumgartner says that Phelps was trying to make up the story to cover his tracks. He was released without charge as authorities didn't think they had enough evidence. Both men left the state shortly afterwards. Baumgartner went to California and Phelps to Iowa. Joyce, and after the story on 60 Minutes, years later, Joyce died in 2022 at the age of 68, 35 years after her daughter's disappearance in her obituary. In her obituary, it was noted that Jillian predeceased her. Jillian's brother and his children are alive, as well as other members of the extended family. No one's in charge of causing Jillian's death, although it was declared legally dead after Phelps' conviction. She has never been located. Now, there was a court case about this in 2007. The State versus Phelps. March 91, a jury convicted Phelps of kidnapping Kirchhoff, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The conviction was affirmed by the court in the State versus Phelps. Back in 2005, Phelps sought an order authorizing forensic DNA tests of certain items of evidence, including 7 postcards went to various authorities about the kidnapping, including purported to have been worn by Kirchhoff when she was kidnapped. He alleged that the current methods of DNA testing were not available at this time of his trial, and that new methods of testing could show the presence of DNA from a person other than Phelps, which could explore evidence relevant to his claim of innocence. He alleged he was diligent and requested the appointment of an attorney to represent him. So, that's the case. That's the story so far. We know that Phelps probably didn't do it. We know Baumgartner said he covered his tracks. But what we do not know is the other person in this, Roy Stevens, the former private investigator who looked into this case. What has happened to Roy Stevens after the 60 Minutes joined after he was fired? Well, if you remember, he was a private investigator. So what does that lead you to believe, though, folks? That leads you to believe, if you heard his confession, he admitted he held a gun pointing in the air, bang, and then Phelps was like, "Can I have a cigarette?" Remember, before that gun in the air, he confessed to Roy Stevens. He confessed to our news reporter. So if we were to look at Roy Stevens, we don't know what's happened to Roy Stevens. If I contacted the producer for 60 Minutes, he would have told me what happened to Roy Stevens. So I guess he left. So what I guess is, so I think he left and probably never ever spoke of the case again. Probably was in jail. or wound up missing. So that would probably lead you to believe what happened in the case. Alright, moving on now.
Holds. Here's Hoda Kotb.
Alright, let's move on now. She was playing in the backyard when it happened. A neighbor's dog suddenly attacked the little girl. Now, what her father did would land him in court, being charged with murdering an animal. Did he go too far? As we first told you a few seasons ago on this broadcast, it was an interactive story. Tonight, we're going to take a second look into this case, and you too are going to vote as well. You can vote after the broadcast, or you can vote during the broadcast. But, like I said before, like we talked about when we first did this story, when I first showed you this story, I posted about it on the community page, and a lot of people are probably upset.
Hello and welcome to the American Player. Here in this channel you'll find song covers.
What happened to the community post? Well, it leads me to believe that, I think some of y'all said that, he went too far. But either way, we're not going to do a live segment. Instead, what we're going to do, because there's no community page on this. Oh, I think... Oh, there we go. I think I have it. I think it's here somewhere. We talked about this 2 years ago, and here's the question. What would you do if your daughter came home with dog bite marks, and you had an argument with your neighbor about the dog, which, in this case, would be the neighbor's dog? There were 3 choices. I would shoot the dog, do nothing, talk to my neighbor about this issue. 75% of you said, talk to my neighbor about this issue, while 25% of you said, I would shoot the dog. This wasn't made up. This was the truth. 25% of you would shoot the dog? Then you're a dumbass. Well, the 75% of you, y'all are correct. That's correct. You would talk to the neighbor about this issue. And if it didn't work out, what would you do next? You would call animal control. And here's another one. There was no vote about this. In the middle of the show, anyone else who wants to talk about the King Canyon case that was aired in Daylight back 2001? Here's one question. Was King Canyon justified in killing the neighbor's dog? None of you voted whether he wasn't. None of you, none of you said, none of you answered the question. So, we're going to it should be real quick. There we go. Just post about while we're doing the show, and you're welcome to vote while you're watching it before the story here. So we're gonna take a break here. When we come back, we're gonna play the story, and then we're gonna play you the story, and then we're going to see how you voted, how they voted, and probably how you voted. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You know, it's been 2 years since we first brought you the story of Ken Cannon. If you don't know who he is, he was a former officer in his state when he was charged for shooting a dog, the neighbor's dog. And at that time, the jury said not guilty, but as you'll soon see, the jury pointed at the victim. At the time, we did a little live segment to where y'all had voted. A lot of you viewed it. And a short time ago, I posted a poll. Just a minute ago before we went on break, asking the question: was Ken justified in killing the neighbor's dog? So here's Hoda Copy with our second look of this Dateline interactive Dateline Give Me a Break Court TV network exclusive. And then what we're going to do after that is we're going to see how everyone voted. Here's Hoda Copy.
In the quiet town of Gainesville, Georgia last spring, Ken Cannon faced a dilemma: whether to trust authorities to protect his child from danger or take matters into his own hands. He put his trust in the law.
You thought the law was going to do what the law does and take care of it?
Sure. I had total trust in the system. I wouldn't believe anyone would just let the bomb sit there and wait for it to explode before they do anything about it.
It all started 11 days before with his wife's urgent call to 911.
My daughter got hurt and she's got blood everywhere. Okay. And how did she get hurt? I don't know. I can't get it out of her. It's something to do with the big dog in the backyard.
Ken Cannon's 9-year-old daughter Amber and her younger brother were playing out back, and Bud, the neighbor's German Shepherd Husky, was chained up to this tree in the middle of their shared backyard. One minute, Amber was skipping over and petting Bud like she had many times before. The next minute, the dog pounced on top of her and attacked. Linda Carpenter, the dog's owner, heard Amber's cries from her driveway.
I couldn't believe that Bud was biting her. It was such a shock. And I ran over, grabbed him by the collar, and pulled him off of her.
You had to yank him off of her?
And I pulled him off of her, yes, and told her to run.
Amber scrambled home, her face and clothing soaked with blood. Her mother, Renee, was trembling at the sight of her.
I was panicked. I thought that I could handle just about anything. But seeing my child with all of that, it was just too much.
Renee didn't wait for the ambulance. She raced Amber to the hospital. Her head was cut open, bite marks across the top of her scalp, puncture wounds on her arm and chest. When Ken Cannon arrived at the hospital, he hardly recognized his little girl.
She had just blood all over her, just everywhere. If it would have got her rolled over and got her to her neck, it could have killed her very quickly.
Ken Cannon was beside his daughter at her hospital bed, holding her hand and trying to calm her. At one point, she asked her dad to do something for her.
She asked me to go home and kill the dog because she was scared of it.
And what did you say to her when she asked you that?
Well, I told her that I couldn't kill the dog because there were procedures in reference to calling animal control and that they were responsible to respond to it and come out and get the animal.
At that point, the Cannons were not worried. They were confident that animal control, less than a mile away, would come that night to remove the dog. In fact, the dog's owner, Linda Carpenter, had already called animal control, and they told her she could leave the dog chained up outside over the weekend, but she would have to bring it in on Monday so it could be checked for rabies. The Cannons didn't know that when they pulled into their driveway after a long night at the hospital, and they were shocked to see the dog still tied up out back. Amber was so terrified she wouldn't step out of the car.
She's just climbing back into the seat. She's afraid Buddy's going to be loose or get loose and come back after her. Basically, I had to just pick her up, hold her, and take her inside.
The next day, Ken got on the phone 3 different times with Animal Control 911, demanding the dog be removed and making threats. The first at 12:04 in the afternoon.
They should have came out after this dog. It's still tied up in my backyard, so I'm going to go here and shoot it.
The next, about 40 minutes later at 12:46.
I'm a patient man, but my dog was 18 stitches in his head, and the dog sitting out in my backyard getting impatient.
And then at 12:59, the director of Animal Control called him back.
I'm just asking you, please, sir, won't let me come out there under these exact circumstances and just take the dog, right?
Animal Control says it decides case by case whether to remove a dog immediately. Usually those cases involve death or severe injury. But the director told Ken that even though his daughter had been mauled, the law allows the dog to be temporarily quarantined at home as long as it's current on its rabies shots. Linda Carpenter assured Animal Control that her dog was vaccinated. Ken's disgust with the system was bubbling over. To make matters worse, his daughter was having horrible nightmares and wouldn't leave the house all weekend long.
She pretty much just slept in the bed with me. Then she tried a couple times to take a nap in her room, and he would bark and it would scare her.
But Amber was relieved knowing it wouldn't go on too much longer. Linda Carpenter told the Cannons and Animal Control that once the dog left, it was never coming back.
I have a plan to have Bud euthanized.
Why was that one of the first thoughts you had? I'm going to have my dog put to sleep.
Because I would never own a dog that would bite a child.
Linda says she felt terrible about the attack, and she and Ken Cannon were not only neighbors, but good friends. They had known each other for 30 years. But days after the dog bite, things were different. There were no more neighborly chats. Linda and the Cannons were not speaking, and Amber was becoming more and more anxious, waiting for Bud to be picked up.
She kept asking when were they going to come and get him, and we told her on Monday.
And on Monday, Linda did take the dog to be checked for rabies, and it would be quarantined for the next 8 days. But despite Linda's promise to put Bud to sleep, Ken wasn't convinced that she would go through with it, and it looked like he may have been right. Just 11 days after the attack, Bud was back, tied up in the very same spot where he attacked Amber.
I was amazed. Linda told Amber, you'll never see that dog again, I promise. And I was not going to allow that dog to be there when Amber pulled up in the yard.
The dog had only been there for 10 minutes when Ken went in the house, got this automatic rifle, and with Bud in the crosshairs, he fired. Linda was on the phone when suddenly she heard the crack of gunfire and ran outside. She was shocked at what she saw.
Just seeing him lying there, dead. You know, with the chain still around his neck. It wasn't like he was loose. He wasn't running. The fact that someone would have the heart to do something like that, to shoot a chained dog.
What did you lose that day?
I lost a friend.
And he was defenseless, right? I mean, there was nothing...
He was defenseless, yes.
Linda says she saw Ken calmly get into his truck and drive off.
This is an emergency. What was that? Well, somebody just shot my dog there. That's what's right.
I couldn't believe he did it. I really couldn't believe that he would do something like that.
Linda says he especially should have known better. You see, Ken Cannon was more than just an ordinary parent. He was an 8-year veteran of the Gainesville Police Force. Now he'd be suspended from the force with pay. Officer Cannon spent his life defending the law. Now he faced criminal charges, cruelty to an animal, and illegally discharging a firearm. If convicted, he'd face up to 2 years in prison and the end of his professional career. So, was Officer Cannon a father protecting his daughter, or a hot-headed cop who took matters into his own hands? 5 months later, it would be up to a jury to decide.
I was acting as a parent. I was taking care of a problem. Protect.
Simple as that.
Sure.
It wouldn't be that simple. Now, was he justified in shooting the dog to protect his family, or just a hot-headed cop? When we come back, Officer Cannon goes to court. Please stay with us. Back to our story. Officer Ken Cannon was arrested for shooting the neighbor's dog, but he did so 11 days after the fact. So was he justified in shooting the dog just to protect his daughter, his daughter, or was he doing it because he was a hot-headed cop not knowing all the procedures? The jury is about to answer that question. Once again, here's Hoda Kotb.
Prosecutors have painted him a canine vigilante.
Of all people, a police officer should know better than to take go out and do this again. As Officer Cannon's trial approached 5 months later, everyone seemed to have an opinion. The morning paper was filled with editorials, some calling Ken the loose cannon, a man with no self-control, a trigger-happy cop. Gainesville Times editorial page editor Rick Parnham says no other story last year provoked such a gut-level response.
People don't like what they viewed as a Wild West mentality. And people say, well, how can we have an officer of the law, a police officer, basically take the law into his own hands?
But was Officer Cannon some kind of lawless cowboy who deserved to be punished for what he did? Or was he justified in killing his neighbor's dog and therefore should walk free?
Please be seated.
As the trial got underway, the prosecutor seemed to have an airtight case. Not just a witness and physical evidence, but a flat-out admission from the man himself.
You killed Bud, correct?
I killed him.
You did nothing other than go get your gun and shoot that dog.
That's exactly what I did, Larry.
Officer Cannon was not apologizing. He says he was protecting his family and the community from a dangerous animal. But the prosecutor would argue that at the time Bud was shot, no one was in harm's way. In fact, Officer Cannon's family wasn't even in the state at the time.
Unless that dog sprout wings and flew to Mississippi, it was not going to attack your family that afternoon, was it?
That's correct.
And if that wasn't enough, the prosecutor had another powerful piece of evidence, that damaging taped conversation to Animal Control.
That should have came out after this dog. It's still tied up in my backyard, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot it.
When you said to dispatch, hey, that dog's still tied up out there, I'm going to go out back and shoot that dog. It sounds like a threat.
Yeah, it was.
It was intended to be a threat.
Sure. I thought it might give them a little bit of intensity to do something, yeah.
And there was something else. The prosecution argued Officer Cannon never bothered to look into the most obvious option. He never knocked on Linda Carpenter's door to ask why the dog was back.
You didn't bother to find out.
I didn't care.
You didn't care.
She made her decision.
And you made yours.
That's correct, I did.
And Linda Carpenter said if he had asked, she would have told him that Bud was going to be euthanized the very next day. She said she brought him home for one last meal.
I felt sorry for him. They told me up at the vet that he hadn't eaten very well, and I took him home to take him out in the backyard to feed him.
And did you feed him?
Yes, sir.
And did you give him some water?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. Have a good day.
And most importantly, the prosecution argued, Animal Control explained to Officer Cannon the lengthy procedure the agency needed to follow in dealing with a dog bite.
I explained to him briefly, not in detail as I have previously here, what the process would entail.
Hawk County Animal Control.
In fact, the process required several steps, an investigation, paperwork, hearings. It could all take weeks in order to officially declare the dog dangerous. And then, if it was declared dangerous, it would ultimately be up to Linda Carpenter to either euthanize her dog or keep it in an enclosed pen on her property. The prosecutor said Officer Cannon knew the process was getting underway.
You as a police officer know that sometimes the wheels of justice move slowly.
Sure.
But do you think it's fair then that if government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then it's up to us to go out there and just do what we think is right, to take the law into our own hands?
I believe each and every person has to be responsible in protecting their family and their community. And if it's so be it that they have to shoot an animal, then shoot it.
Officer Cannon knew the law. He broke the law.
Okay.
But to defense attorney Dan Summer, that didn't make him a guilty man.
In this country, you're allowed to break the law if you're justified.
Officer Cannon's defense would be built not on who done it, but why.
In my heart, I knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He did what any God-fearing, decent parent would have done, and that is eliminate the threat to his child.
The defense first called Officer Cannon's daughter, Amber, to the stand.
He bit me on my arm and my chest, the back of my shoulder, and across my head.
Amber testified she lived not only with the physical scars, but the long-lasting emotional scars as well.
You had to dream the dog got loose?
Yes, I did.
What happened when the dog got loose?
He had killed me.
This is a justification defense.
The defense set out to show that Officer Cannon was not a violent, angry man, simply a concerned and loving father, afraid the dog would attack again, and that he shot only as a last resort.
Now, let me ask you this, Officer Cannon. First of all, are you proud that you shot the dog?
Not proud, no.
Are you ashamed that you shot the dog?
No, I'm not ashamed. I felt as though it was a ticking bomb. I felt as though that could go off at any time, and I felt I had a responsibility to act.
The defense said the dog was an immediate threat tied up out back, even with Officer Cannon's family away from home. There were other children in the area, and Linda Carpenter, the dog's owner, never warned anyone he could snap.
There were no fences.
No, sir.
Did you have a sign up that said, warning, dangerous dog?
No, sir.
Is there anything that would have put anybody on notice, whether it be man, woman, or child, that Bud was there and could make physical contact with that person?
No, sir. There was nothing up.
And about that phone call to animal control played earlier in court,
Either they need to come out here and deal with it, I'm gonna deal with it. I'm not gonna leave it out here with my children.
the defense attorney argued it was nothing more than a cry for help, begging someone to get rid of the dog. As for talking to Linda Carpenter, there seemed to be no use in that, the defense said. They said it was obvious how she felt when she brought the dog back home.
You saw that as what, a slap in the face?
No, I didn't take it personal, but I took it as though she didn't care about my children.
The defense attorney was about to turn the tables. He said the wrong person was on trial. It wasn't his client, Officer Cannon, who was to blame, but the government agency, Animal Control, for doing nothing, and Linda Carpenter, the dog's owner, for bringing the dog back. Animal Control Officer Rick Phillips took the stand and acknowledged he didn't respond quickly after Amber was mauled on Friday.
So, all of Saturday and Sunday and half of Monday, there was a danger to the public out there on Georgia Avenue, wasn't there?
A dog had bitten someone? Yes, sir.
All right. Did it concern you as the head animal control officer that a dog that had bitten a child was
Yes, sir.
in a yard,
Yes, sir.
not confined,
Yes,
simply
sir.
restrained?
Yes, sir.
And you did nothing, did you?
I did what I believed was what I am allowed to do within the limits of the law at this time, sir.
But 11 days after his daughter's attack, Officer Cannon saw no sign that anyone was going to do anything fast enough. After all, Bud was tied up, same chain, same tree, same spot. At this point, the defense said it was understandable that Officer Cannon would run out of patience.
Here's a guy that exercised, in my opinion, enormous restraint. Most people, like myself, would have shot the dog that night. End of discussion. But Ken, because he's a trained police officer, tried to do the right thing until it was evident at the very end that he wasn't going to get any help from anybody. The check wasn't in the mail.
They've got the wrong person on trial, folks.
In closing arguments, the defense attorney slammed Animal Control and then directly addressed Linda Carpenter.
And how dare they come in here and ask you to convict this man when that woman has done what she has done? Let her stare at me all day long. That's just fun, Miss Carpenter. It's unconscionable.
You made Linda Carpenter out to be the bad guy.
She was the bad guy. There's absolutely no way in the world that any decent human being is going to put the welfare of an animal over the health and safety of a child. End of discussion.
Would the jurors see it the same way? After 4 days of testimony, Officer Cannon's fate rested in their hands, and they would do something no one expected.
Not even one juror would just point the finger at Ken Cannon and say, "Guilty! Guilty!" But when we come back, the jury decides, along with the internet voters out there, along with the conclusion of our story. Please, please, dear God, please stay with us. If convicted, Officer Ken Cannon could face 2 years in prison and the end of the police force. What would the jury decide in this case? The person who shot the dog or the person that left the dog tied up into the neighbor's backyard? Again, with the conclusion of our story, Hoda Kotb.
It was a tense time. And nobody said anything in the beginning that I recall. We just sat there for a minute looking at each other.
The jurors started their deliberation. Before them, the task of deciding whether or not Officer Cannon was justified in shooting his neighbor's dog. We sat down with 3 of the 6 jurors.
Any dog lovers in the group?
I am.
The jurors listened to the evidence. They were particularly disturbed because the officer shot the dog while he was chained up with nowhere to go.
And I thought it was cruel. I mean, I would never think about shooting a dog.
I was frustrated that the dog was there and chained up and somewhat innocent. I mean, he didn't have any choices in the matter. Then there was no warning except that the dog was shot.
But they also believed Officer Cannon was acting on instinct as a father.
You know, if it was my daughter and she was wanting me to do something about what happened to her, then I can understand his frame of mind. Then to hear that she had been tossed around like a rag doll, what got me.
But weren't there other options? What about walking up to Linda Carpenter's door, ringing the doorbell and saying, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
But isn't that sort of the more rational thing to do?
It would be, but it seemed he was so angry and their communication was so broke down, him and Miss Carpenter, at that point.
Ken Cannon's attorney did something that some would say is clever. He took this trial and flipped it. Here's the guy who's on trial, who admits he shot a dog, and Ken Cannon's attorney says, you know who the bad guys are? Linda Carpenter and Animal Control. How effective was his approach?
Very effective. Very, very effective. He kept the jurors educated on the case, more so I felt than the prosecution did.
And the jurors did not buy Linda Carpenter's story.
I told her that I would have the dog euthanized after the quarantine's over.
Did you believe Linda Carpenter when she said, I was going to put that dog to sleep?
No.
No?
No.
No.
3 no's.
I could see that she was a dog lover, and, if it was my dog, I wouldn't want to put it to sleep either. And I think she was thinking about that first, more so than the safety of the kids.
And they all agree putting the dog back in the yard again was a serious mistake.
I mean, what was going on in her head? To bring back that dog? I mean, it's just common sense.
My heart went out to her because I kind of felt sorry that she was alone, without her dog. But at the same time, it was like, you really could have prevented this.
But with all their considerations, the jury said it all came down to that central question raised by the defense.
All I could hear in my mind was he justified? Was he justified? Was it a dangerous dog?
Why do you make publish the verdict?
After more than 3 hours, they reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find a defendant as to count 1, not guilty. As to count 2, not guilty.
The trial would have been over then and there, but the jurors were about to do something extremely rare. They asked the judge if they could speak, and when they did, out of the camera's view, they wagged their finger at Animal Control, and especially at Linda Carpenter, suggesting she should be punished for what they say was her role in the shooting.
The owner of the dog never really received any reprimand, citation.
That was sweet. Very sweet vindication.
Because that told you they understood your case, they believed everything you said, they believed in Ken Cannon.
Absolutely.
It was a big sigh of relief for the Cannon family. But on her way out of the courtroom, Linda Carpenter could not believe she was the one being condemned when someone else was on trial.
What did I do? I have not done anything. Why should I be prosecuted? Ken took the law into his own hands. He was judge, jury, and executioner of my dog.
31 right 29 check.
But back on the police force days after the trial, Officer Cannon says he was prepared to lose everything in order to defend what he believed in.
I believe that we have to protect our families, even if it means answering for something that may be in question. And I will, to the day I die, with my family. And I would hope anyone would do the same for their children.
Officer Cannon says he plans to take legal action against the county and the city. He says they failed to protect him and his family.
Here's 2 common senses. The first thing is, Hey neighbor, how's it going? I want to talk to you about the dog. What about it? My daughter came into your house, pet the dog, and he bit her. What is going on? Then she would tell you, well, I plan to have the dog euthanized after I give his last meal. Just that simple. Don't just go, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off about my family. I'm pissed off about my daughter. I'm going to go shoot the dog. I'm going to go take a shit in the urinal. And then go through the whole scenario. Second, to Linda Carpenter. Look, the wrong procedures. There are procedures out there. Get the dog euthanized. It should have been state animal controls. I mean, what you need to do here, if you are an owner of a pet, there are steps you take. If you have a fence, put on the fence, beware of dog. Just like that. And then people will be aware. I mean, you'd be like, oh, my dog would never bite. And there was something else. I mean, listen to what she said.
Cannon family. But on her way out of the courtroom, Linda Carpenter could not believe she was the one being condemned when someone else was on trial.
What did I do? I have not done anything.
I didn't have done anything. What did I do? You failed. You failed. You did something. You didn't follow procedures for animal control. You said, oh, I fed him for his last meal. Just so he can euthanize the next day. I mean, was it a weekend? I mean, if she had talked to Hoda Kotb, she would have told her, hey, she would have told her side of the story, and then a new trial would have been happening, then King Kennedy would have been suspended from the force. But that's not what happened here. You know, let me, here's how it would be. See this one? It's like a flip of a coin. The trial was flipped onto Linda Carpenter. But I still believe that, look, we all want to protect our kids and our families. That brings me to the third common sense. Move out of Georgia and find a state that legalizes the use of a weapon. Texas, baby. Texas, bitch. Under Texas law, there is Texas law out there which specifically states if your life was in danger, you had a legal, if your life was in danger, if you feel like someone's life, your life was in danger, you had a legal right to use deadly force. I'm not making this up. Here is a preview of our next second look next Saturday about somebody trying to shoot somebody under Texas law.
Hello and welcome to the American Player.
really not making this up. So let me, here we go.
Which was that Mr. Broom was not justified in using deadly force, that is, in killing someone, under the circumstances.
Under Texas law, if Broom felt his life was threatened, he had a legal right to use deadly force, to shoot and kill Edwards while defending himself. Remember, though, Edwards was trying to drive away from the parking lot when Todd Broom fired. The motives of the two men in that split second was the issue before the grand jury.
Did you miss it? Let's play it one more time.
Mr. Broom was not justified in using deadly force, that is, in killing someone, under the circumstances.
Under Texas law, if Broom felt his life was threatened, he had a legal right to use deadly force, to shoot and kill Edwards while defending himself. Remember, though, Edwards was trying to drive away from the parking lot when Todd Broom fired. The motives of the two men in that split second was the issue before the grand jury.
Now, who was the victim here? The victim was Todd Broom. He had a legal right to use deadly force. But Ken Cannon said he wanted to defend his family. Well, this is not Texas. It was in Georgia. They do not have a legal right to use deadly force law, which we have here in Texas. But if it happened here in Texas, then the tables would be turned. Then it'd be like the same thing. Remember, though, Lena Carpenter said that she was feeding him for the dog's last meal. She fed him and she gave him water. And also remember this: Officer Cannon called 911, which leads you to believe that he didn't care about all the procedures. He just wanted to protect his daughter. That's right. You also got to look at the facts that not many people go through the procedures of animal control. It's like you're fed up with your child getting attacked by dogs, so you go for the obvious reasoning. You shoot to kill. Our next second look is going to be looking into the Idaho case, Ruby Ridge, Idaho. Nearly over 30 years ago, the case of Ruby Ridge. We'll hear from Randy Weaver, the family, and the former FBI investigator who retired. That's coming up on our next Game Break second look next Saturday. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. When it comes to education, everybody wants what's best for our kids when it comes to education. But what about when a teacher duct tapes a child, an autistic child, and then proceeds to do nothing about it? And two people get involved, and people need to be replaced in that school board. As we still take our second look, our viral break consists of a father who is very angry. He has one hand behind his back and proceeds to speak to the school board in a timely manner. You may like this one.
To sit here and hear that, oh, this is an internal matter, I can't get my head around that. If I or anybody in here walked up and threw any of you out of a chair and started kicking you, you know how many phones would be up to somebody's ear calling the police? And then we're talking about a 5-year-old autistic child, much less my child or anybody's child. It's just, I question whether any of you are qualified to sit up at this board. I remember some of you being here in the last few meetings I've been to. So this isn't just news. This didn't just pop out to y'all here like it did to us. You've been knee deep in it. And just to look at you is just so difficult. I hear these flowery speeches and we're sorry. Well, sorry is a little late. And to not be angry it's not my child. I'm not angry for those people and those parents. I'm angry for everybody else. I hear stories about children being duct taped. Who the hell do you think you are? I think come election time, it needs to be not just Mr. Grant that goes, but that principal needs to leave. Yep. The assistant superintendent needs to leave. And you all need to be replaced. Maybe what we need is less education, more common sense. Yep. Because common sense, it seems to me, that teacher's been rubber-roomed, would have been gone, this would have been out in the public, and it would have been handled properly, because what we're doing right now is bouncing off the wall. I've never seen so much anger out of people that I consider to be so tame and pacifistic. I've never seen anger. I'm looking at mothers that walk around pulling, and they want to rip your arms off. And it's just an abomination I've seen in front of me, and I can only say you're lucky it was not my child. You're fortunate it was not my child that was thrown to the ground and killed. So you need to really get it together, because I can guarantee the conversations I've had with people, election time comes up and we know everybody's name here. And you need to make it happen, because I just don't see you being here much longer.
Now, this father took the cake when it came to defending a child, but the teacher abused his child. Brentwood Union School District pays over $950,000 in damages. Now, a bunch of comments were, it's like, this is not my child. Generally, the most threatening thing he could have said at that moment. If it was his child, he would have had to use both hands, which could bring up the destruction of the multiverse. Finally, a story where then everyone clapped actually happens. He gave him that, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. A strong man stands up for himself, while a stronger man steps up for others. Exactly right, you know. This happened today, he probably got caught off by a board member saying, I'm sorry, your 3 minutes is up. Well, getting too sorry is just a little way, you know. Like I always say, my mom, when I apologize to my mom, she's like, you should have thought of that before you went ahead and did it. While I'm saying the Board of Education, hey, y'all should have thought about, you know, y'all should have thought about not paying the district, not paying the teacher before you went ahead and did it. Alright, there's time for one more, and then we're going to wrap up our second look.
Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Now, I once told you about, you know, parents confronting school leaders. And it all started with this video.
For yourself. Can I explain to you, sir? Can I just talk to you, explain to you? What we do is, they have a big screen in their room. And when that bus comes out, we have adults all through the hallway here that help. So if y'all got adults all through the hallway, how did it happen for the third time? Okay. Not the first. The first time I was calm. I was understanding because I understood it could happen. The second time, I was mad, but I let it go. The third time, my son called me from the bus, crying, yelling, screaming, talking about he don't know where his sister is. I'm supposed to be at work, which is an hour away from where we live here in Snellville. Now imagine if I went to work. My 5-year-old daughter would be here, stuck. Miss Curry left early today. We did have the parapro in the room. I don't know what happened, but I can try to get Miss Fields, and we can try to figure out what happened. Unacceptable.
My son told them to stop him. He said, don't pull off. I cannot leave without my sister. And they told him to leave anyway. My son was on the bus screaming and crying, and y'all still told the bus to pull off. Whoever it was. There was a teacher who told him to pull off. They should have let my son get off the bus in front of his sister, because that's what we told him to do. They didn't allow him to get off the bus.
That's transportation. That's a separate.
It was a teacher that told him.
Y'all allow these buses to come pick these kids up, therefore you're responsible. No, sir. You're responsible when I release my child to get on your bus to come to your school. Until my child makes it home through my door, you're responsible for my child, not me. You are. Until my child reaches back down, where I live, you're responsible for my child getting home. No, I don't care. Y'all didn't care nothing about my kid when she was missing for 3 times. This is the 3rd time. And you want to talk to me about somebody else's kid and you ain't care about mine? Don't ask me to be calm. Don't patronize me. Don't chastise me. Don't do it. And you doing it now. So stop. Because it's the 3rd time. I don't care about nobody else's kid out there. And you know what? They need to hear this so they understand what y'all trying to cover up. That y'all losing people's kids. What you
hear what's going on. You want to know what's going on? Step your ass in here. That's what you can do. Step in here. The third time that my daughter has been lost. Do you want to talk? Because we can talk. Step in. No, we're not going nowhere. We're going to stand right here.
Let me write something down what you want to share with us.
It ain't nothing for you to write down. What you want to write down? What you want to write down? But this is my third time, though. Understand that as a father, this is my third time that y'all have lost my 5-year-old daughter, my baby. This is the third time y'all lost her. And my son called me from the bus crying, wondering where his damn sister is. This is the third time.
And it's crazy that none of y'all heard about this.
Right.
This has happened
And the
3 times.
second time, y'all tell me that if we don't come get her by 4 o'clock, y'all ain't responsible for her.
That's what the lady who sits right there said to me. She said that there's a teacher's party at 4 o'clock. And so after 4 o'clock, she's not responsible for my child because she has to go to a teacher's party.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm going to apologize for that. I was off campus yesterday. That's why.
He said that he was on the bus just a minute ago. He was screaming and crying and telling the bus driver, don't pull off. I need to get off the bus because I'm not allowed to leave without my sister. That's what we told him. Okay. Don't leave without my sister. And whoever was out there directing the buses told him to pull off anyway and don't let my son off the bus. Now he's screaming and crying because he know that he's not supposed to be without his sister because this is the third time that this has happened. So for us to watch our own back,
I want to make sure everybody sees and understands.
for us to watch our own back, we told my son, stay with her because obviously don't nobody in this goddamn office care about her or she's not your responsibility after 4 o'clock, right? So after that, I said, don't leave without my daughter. So he did what he was supposed to do, but somebody told the bus to go.
You're right. Make sure everybody.
And we work an hour away from here, so there's no way we can make it to this school on time. This is the third time. The third time. What are we supposed to do?
I don't even trust y'all. That's terrible.
The last time,
Worry every day if my daughter is gonna make it on the damn bus.
the last time she was in the hallway sleep. They just skipped over. They just missed over her in the hallway sleep with a line full of kids, but they missed her. The first time she was wandering around the hallways on the side where the parents pick her up, and she never been on that side of the hallway. So who is watching our child?
Nobody. Ain't nobody watching these goddamn.
They shouldn't have to come to school and be scared. She comes to school and be scared.
As I said earlier, sir, ma'am, I know you may not want to hear this, but this is the first I'm hearing. What I want to do is write down your concern.
Can we write down all 3 then? Because she was here the second time, and if y'all don't know about it, that means nobody knew about it. She didn't say nothing to nobody.
That's what I want to do. Like I
These
said,
young people out here doing their own thing.
And they trying to cover their own stuff up. They covering their own stuff up because y'all supposed to know about every single thing that happened to every single one of these kids in here.
You can't expect no parent, especially in my predicament, to come in here and be understanding after this shit done happened 3 times. I was nice.
Now what if the next time she done got in somebody's car? What if the next time she done got on the wrong bus and nobody know where she is?
Well, one time is too many. I agree with you, Dad. I agree with you. One time is too many. As a parent, I understand that completely. Let me give you an opportunity to write it down, or I can write it down, whatever you prefer. That includes all the names.
I want
everything in there.
Everybody. Yeah.
Now, after this aired, it was on TV, and they told, and the board said, well, because of that video, we're not allowing you on school property, and they decided, you know what, that's not true, they're allowed back. Now, it's another case of parent confrontations. Next week on our second look, a mother confronts a principal because her daughter was having a Donald Trump flag. It was a Make America Great flag, and a police officer told her to leave, not the principal, because of what happened. We'll play through that video, and then we're going to rush some content. That's next week's broadcast. Come up on Monday, an issue about half days at school. And the reason for this is because, you know, here in Flower Bluff, there was 4 days. There was like 4 days this week. It was a holiday last week, and this week was another 4 days with a half a day. Like, nobody ever goes to school. I'm gonna tell you what happened, and you know, I lost for words. It's game break for Solve This Issue game break Saturday. See you again for game break Monday. Concentration, not strength. Stop blowing. Speak up. No jaywalking. Good night.